everybody. Good morning. Welcome to this episode of Think Business Live, CEO Edition. Gabe Carp and myself are looking forward to talking to Beck Besecker, founder and CEO of Marxent. Beck, it's great to talk with you this morning. What you do is really cool. You guys are the leader in augmented reality, virtual reality, and 3D solutions for home good retailers and manufacturers. I think this gives a pretty cool visual of what you do. This is I love talking about virtual reality. There's a commercial that I've always seen on ESPN where the guy is, he has the glasses on and he goes to jump and he jumps into the TV. Have you seen that? It's like a YouTube commercial. But I did virtual reality once. Again, it's not buying furniture, but it is so realistic. I was on this plank and I had on 100 stories high, and I had to go get the donuts. And I literally, Beck and Gabe, could not walk. I couldn't walk. And I knew it was, not real, but it still was so real. And so I just want to kind of talk about, the beauty of what you're doing and the solution that you're giving people to visually see what they're doing. And so, from a business standpoint, my first question to you really is, how much does virtual reality help companies raise their sales?
Sure. I actually just spent the weekend at Universal Studios doing all the new virtual reality rides. I don't know if you've ever done that Harry Potter ride, but it's pretty incredible. So Marxent's reason for existing is to help big ticket retailers. So this is kitchen, bath, furniture, kind of in the home goods space. This is one of the spaces that has yet to really make the meaningful jump online. You have furniture has done it to some degree, but still it's 95+% of furniture is really still sold in store. Wayfair's made an impact, Amazon's made an impact, but if you look at the average order value for online home goods, it's in the $200 to $300 range, where in store it's more like, $1,500 to $2,000 plus in terms of average order value. So the problem with selling big ticket categories online is usually there's some kind of configuration element. Customer has to be confident in their purchase. You've got, there's think about designing a kitchen, right? You have to be able to construct it and visualize it. And so really 3D for us is a platform and a tool to give consumers a self-service way to create their spaces, whether it's kitchen, bath, living room, even outdoor decking. They design it, and if they have the ability to design it and visualize it, they'll buy it online. And so we're in the business of helping these home goods retailers sell these big ticket categories online. Our average order value for something like decking online is $11,000. Average order value for kitchens online is $4,000. Average order value for furniture is over $2,000. And so we've sort of cracked the code on how do I sell big ticket categories online using 3D and AR and VR as well.
Oh. And this, and I, disclosure, I've been working with Beck for years, so I know the company extremely well. Beck, I see stuff has just been blowing up quite recently, sort of on the heels of COVID. What impact has COVID had on this?
Yeah, it's been, it was interesting when COVID hit in, call it April last year, the furniture companies were not considered, what do they call it? Essential businesses, right? And so a lot of them, Lazy Boy or Ashley and others had to close doors for some period of time. On the flip side, the home goods industry or the DIYs, the Lowe's of the world, they were considered essential businesses and they thrived. I mean, they both had incredible years. Every DIY had a great year in 2020. And then the furniture stores opened back up with, safety protocols, and then people got bored, right? It was every project they were at home all the time, and they wanted to make their place feel good and a place they wanted to be around. We have one of the things, we get to see every project in our cloud of any project created, and you would laugh at the number of bedrooms and living rooms that now have a little office in the corner. And so we got to physically watch people change their spaces as a function of COVID. So yeah, so people all of a sudden, were willing to, board and had time to spend time and build out their spaces, and they couldn't often have people in, right, to do the work. And so they had to not only build their spaces, but do it themselves. And so, so it would have thought impossible for a company to sell a kitchen online, exclusively online, start to finish, and spend 10 grand. But we're doing like $10 million a month in online kitchens now. From zero, 10 million a month in online kitchens, like from zero 6 months ago.
That's unbelievable to me, but I'm not surprised to hear that. Pre-COVID studies were showing that 85% of the jobs that exist in the year 2030 did not exist today. This was a 2020 stat, pre-COVID. And COVID, I think, has accelerated everything 5-6 years. What seemed impossible, virtual, for many people to comprehend, remote working, flex time, virtual assistants all over the country, working remotely is now as mainstream as possible, as people have kind of shape shifted that. And so
I'd go further. It is like the number of candidates who start with, I want a remote role, is like 80% now.
Yeah.
And so people have, like, I live in St. Pete, Florida, and people are just flocking here to work from home, because of the weather, and they're building apartments like crazy that are all focused around, kind of you got your bedroom, you got your living room, and you got your little office. And so it's definitely happened. It's here to stay. No question.
On that note, I want to talk to you about company culture, right? So you have this business where 6 months ago, you're not even, 10 million in sales here, this and the other. You're seeing such an uptick in everything. And so how do you, from a company culture standpoint, because we're sitting here, it was a year ago yesterday that the CDC said we are in a global pandemic. And I remember a year ago yesterday, we were going on spring break in April, and we still hadn't canceled our trip yet because we thought, well, maybe it'll pass. And here we are a year later talking about numbers like this. Company cultures have shifted and had to evolve in a major way. How have you shaped and shifted and pivoted and really kind of nurtured your culture?
Sure. Actually, I remember I went on a cruise in like early February last year, right? Because you wouldn't have even thought of doing something like that, right? So we have, and we're part of the Quicken Loans family of companies. Dan Gilbert is kind of a guy we look up to and try to emulate in terms of Quicken Loans culture. They've just done such a phenomenal job. And so we've sort of stolen all the best ideas and sort of added our own twist. The way we run culture is through what we call company habits. And they're just a shared habit that everybody in the company does that reflects what we value. And it's a very simple technique. And it works really well because it just sort of passes to the next new hire very easily without having to. We don't spend a lot of time talking about platitudes of, integrity, and, we don't put stuff on walls. We just, if we want to tell the company we value a principle, we just build a habit around it. And so one of those habits that's really powerful is what we call the 5x5. And it's a simple email that every employee sends to me and my brother, who's our CTO, co-founder, every week, and whoever else they want to send it to. And it's 5 things I accomplished this week and my 5 goals for next week. And what that habit does is it tells you we value consistency. Like, if you don't have the consistency gene, you can't work at Marxent, especially when you think about working remote, right? And how important it is for somebody to be self-driven and have a methodology. The other thing that 5x5 does is it says you have the right to talk to leadership on a very consistent basis. Mm-hmm. And if somebody has an issue, an opportunity, they have an ambition, they have an idea, the chances that they're going to tell me if we have a standard line of communication every week goes up 1,000%.
Yeah.
We also encourage them to take that opportunity to call out the contributions of somebody else in the company. And so they can say, hey, Gabe did a great job on X, Y, and Z. You might want to, give him a pat on the back or shout him out at the all team meeting. And so that one little tool, when you go through orientation with us, they tell you why it's important, how to use it. Everybody in the company does it. And it creates this sort of operating rhythm, right? Where every week I get to see contributions. It helps me also, align across the business and get to know people. But the real value of it is to tell you, be consistent. You have the right to communicate with leadership. Yeah. And so we have a whole series of little habits that we built into the company.
So and I've seen the culture firsthand. Obviously, I've been in it. I've lived it. It's awesome. It's pivoting. I want to talk about pivoting because today Marxent is doing fantastic, and the business model and the way in which you're going about business is light years away from where you started. So, can you talk about, number one, just give a quick anecdote of what the first business model was, but more importantly, in the context of how you've adjusted, what your approach has been to adjusting over the years, and how important that is in dealing with the challenges of growing a business.
Yeah, we started off. We had a very, I'd known Gabe, and I'd known Josh, who was one of our original investors, Josh Linkner, and we had a very loose. My brother and I had started a company and sold it previously, so we had some success in through the startup space, and so our original idea was a very loose idea around sort of open chat within a specific geographic area. Pretty quickly into the business, it realized that there were all sorts of problems with the model. There were other people coming into the space. We just weren't going to be fast enough to capitalize. And then, but through that opportunity, we got exposed to what really hadn't been called augmented reality yet. And we were like, wow, this is a really powerful opportunity. My brother's background's in math, computer science, and 3D. And so, he immediately said, this is a really, by this time we're 3 people, right? So it was a small pivot. But then we really found our calling. And then over the years, we went from, we spent 4 years doing all sorts of like augmented reality marketing campaigns, not almost gimmicky, right? It was like, beer bottles and notepads at Target that were interactive and all calendars and shoes. And so we spent 3 or 4 years building tons of AR apps that were really, and then, but they didn't scale. There wasn't a unit economic pricing model that made the business valuable. And so we got an opportunity to work with Lowe's and another sort of home improvement manufacturer. And then we started looking, wow, if you look at the cost modeling, the shelf life of those products, the configurable component, the visualization component, and nobody's online with these big categories, there was that kind of light bulb moment. We said, just drop everything, 100% focus on the home vertical, and let's go attack this thing. So to me, the story, the pivoting is comes somewhat natural to me. I think that it's you just keep proposing something to the market until it talks back to you that that there's a need, and the idea that there's very few businesses, with the exception of things like Instagram, which probably had other lives before it was Instagram, where people go into it very deliberately. Like even Microsoft, I think, started as a translation company way back when, before they saw the OS opportunity. So I think there's this idea of like you're prescient and you have an idea and it just works and you never change from that vision is pretty few and far between. So I think just creating an organization that's willing to shift and not look back and, just keep focusing on the future, and, everything you do is just a chance to learn is critical.
Yeah. The comment on that is, one of the comments on that is that a lot of people look at companies that make big pivots. And I know there was a time when Marxent had made a decision to move into a different business model and started turning down a lot of business. I think he turned down almost $1 million of business because it didn't fit the new model. And sometimes people say, God, that takes so much courage to do that. And while it does, it's totally different from courage. To me, it's that I think you realized you couldn't not do the other thing. You couldn't not pivot. It was the courage, and it would have been stupid courage, would have been to stay the course on something you knew that wasn't going to get you to what you knew to be the promised land.
Yeah, you have to. I always think about Netflix in this way. And as I understand it, what Hastings did was basically split the company in two. And he said, you're going out of business, but I'll give you a bonus if you drive cash, and you're dead, I'll hire you into the new company. You kind of got to set up the company into two boats, because you just don't want to. I mean, we had longstanding relationships with these clients that weren't a fit anymore, and you want to manage your reputation, and you want to do right by them, and it's not their fault, and you want to find them. And so what we did is we basically took one guy and said, your job is to transition these 5 or 6 accounts to other vendors over the next year. And, I bonused him for doing it. And it was probably a terrible job, for a while. And then he progressed in the company and found new roles. But you have to structure the transition in such a way where it's somebody's job to transition out of the old space. Otherwise, it'll just hang around, and you won't be able to actually make a transition. And I see a ton of companies that started out as like a digital tech agency, where they do basically, ad hoc professional services work, and they come up with a great idea, but never do it.
Yeah. I love everything that you're talking about. I want to rewind for a minute because, as you were saying earlier, the amount of people that say, hey, I want a remote job is almost 80% right now. And I think you're right. And I think people have, shifted and are getting more aligned this past year with their own personal values, what they want, their family time, making sure that their values are in alignment with the company values, that companies don't just have values like you're talking about on the wall, but they actually live their values on a day-to-day basis, have open communication, especially when it comes to leadership. But I want to rewind a little bit, because I think sometimes when people hear and listen to CEOs, I'm a business coach, and I work with successful people who are stuck, and I get them unstuck. And so I love talking to people and rewinding their story, because I think sometimes you're at a point where the law of proximity is so big that people feel like they can't take that first step. And so I want you to rewind and talk about kind of your first couple steps in your entrepreneurial journey, and how people can connect to that today as they are starting their businesses and changing the next decade and landscape to be part of that 85% of jobs that exist in 2030 that don't exist today.
Yeah, being an entrepreneur, it started for me with my dad, who owned a sporting goods store, and my job was, helping do inventory and do iron-on T-shirts and kind of fun stuff like that. And I was laughing with him the other day that one of my jobs was counting golf tees during inventory time, which it wasn't until I was in my 30s where I thought back, there was no reason to count every golf tee. He was just like, keeping me busy. Yeah. But I was working on something when I was 7 or 8 years old, and he was like, you should really copyright that. And I'm like, what's a copyright? And he, told me what it was, and we found an artist. It was this, sort of image we created for the sports store. And basically my whole adult life was trying to relive or recapture that same sense of sort of, pleasing dad into, like, I created something and it was fun, and my brother was there with me. And, so we were always building tree houses and go-karts. And so in a lot of ways, business for us is kind of a grown-up version of getting to work with my brother and build things, right? If there were a way you could do that without having to like deal with all, legal stuff and, customers and employees, we'd probably, do that. But this is the way you can build things, right? As an adult. And so for me, I was in grad school, and I was one of those people that, 1996, 97, 98, 99, where the internet became a thing. And I was going down a different path around data science, and the internet came out. I read an article on Jeff Bezos, and I just felt like it was the world had struck oil, and if you didn't become part of that, you were silly. And so that was the genesis of our first company, which was a targeted marketing platform focused for e-commerce retailers. And then And then I had that feeling again in 2011 when we started Marxent, where I was an executive at a very large, $1 billion plus valuation company, and mobile came out, and I was in charge of M&A, and I'm meeting all these like startup guys, from California who are working on mobile, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be the old guy in a company that has no idea how something new works. And I said, I just can't miss out on what's happening in the mobile space. And so did it again. But I had forgotten how hard it was the first year of a startup. Like the grit, there's nobody around you to do anything. I don't even think I booked a flight online previous to that. And so it took me about a year to find my, sort of the excuse the term, but kind of piss and vinegar to like really go after something, and the grit it takes to get through the first year of a business, find your reference account, build the economic model, find your first employees, pay payroll. Yeah. So I actually just, our HR director, one of the things I have found in COVID is it's very hard to measure grit remotely. And so we check for consistency.
Yeah.
We check for culture fit, but like it's we've had some challenges around hiring people remotely and not being able to sort of measure their ability to self-direct.
Yeah.
In COVID, there's nobody around them to coach them. They have to be proactive to get it onboarded.
Yeah, you really have to, and I find a lot of people aren't good at putting structure into their lives. And so remotely, you have to kind of infuse the structure. But one of the things, and I'm seeing that a lot of companies are realizing that they have to give a foundation. They don't want to micromanage, but they have to give the structure for many people because they can't do it themselves. I find myself working with companies. Yeah, I find myself working with companies like that all the time, and working with people in their company to help them actually build the structure so they can, quantify more grit and dollars. Your path is interesting because there's no straight line to success, and your story shows it, and the motivation of and inspiration you get from reading an article on Jeff and all these other things. There's so many twists and turns to get you where you are today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great. It's great to hear your story.
Yeah. Hey, Beck, in 30 seconds or less, what's your ideal client?
Ideal client.
Not who is your ideal client, but what about the company makes them an ideal client? Because I know you've had some really good ones and some really challenging ones.
It's always about sort of cross-functional ownership. I mean, what we do is, it's online, it's in-store, it's marketing, it's product, it's analytics, so for a client, and not just to be a good client for us, but for them to sort of get a really good return on investment in what we do or in this space, they've got to have somebody that can work between, multiple functions in the organization to create a unified vision. And what we find, it's challenging if our project gets relegated into the marketing team or the product team or the analytics team. Everything we do is so cross-functional that we really need a good champion that can work across the organization.
Yeah. All right. You ready for a quick speed round, Beck?
Fire away.
All right. Finish this sentence, Beck. One thing every entrepreneur should do today to cultivate a new idea is?
Let's see. Read.
Favorite book and why?
Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, because also like Shawshank, also like a Castaway, anything that has to do with getting yourself out of a pickle.
Right. Those are some deep movies. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll ask the one I know you've asked a lot back. If you could have any superpower, be any superhero, who would it be and why?
Oh, it'd be Batman or Iron Man. And here's an interesting, you can never hire anybody that says Superman.
Why is that?
Because everything was given to him. There was no problem to solve. And so what we learn is whoever says Batman and Iron Man has the right, they don't want the superpower. They want to have to build it. And it's a really interesting, so we don't hire any Superman.
That is awesome. You know, a question I ask when I've done a lot of recruiting in my past life when I was in commercial real estate, and I work with a lot of clients I'm recruiting. And a question I always ask is, on a scale from 1 to 10, how badly do you want to, fill in the blank, be at this type of company? And it amazes me how many people will say at an interview, about a 6, or about a 7. So I always say, only hire the 10s, right?
Yeah.
And so, and end the interview if they say that number. Well, Beck, I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Thank you.
I want to just kind of highlight a couple of things that you talked about, which is, making sure that you pivot, you stay the course, know when to say no, like the story Gabe was talking about, really understand the habits and make a culture of growing habits in your company. So not only do people then grow personally, but they really grow their, they grow and they stay consistent in the business. Open communication, I think how you talked about it is absolutely key. And there's no straight line to success. And you've done a great job of showing that today. So I can't thank you enough. Think Community, if you want to get a hold of Beck and his company, you can go to, tell them how to get a hold of you, Beck.
Sure. Just email me, beck@marxent.com, BECK@MARXENT.com.
All right. Or you can go to marxentlabs.com or marxent.com. I appreciate you being on the show. Gabe, always fun co-hosting with you. I'll let you close it out. And thanks, everybody. Gabe, floor is yours.
Yeah. Thanks, Beck. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Take care.